Hey everyone, this is Stanpai. Now, for those of you who've been following my channel since way back in the start of 2017, you know that among the many different things I was doing at the start included chapter recaps for Attack on Titan. Now, that is because I, of course, have been a fan of the series for quite some time, since 2013 or 2014, back when the craze was hitting North America. I was a little late to the party, but I ultimately ended up watching the series just like everybody else, and like many others, I ended up being pretty devoted to it. Even after the anime never got its second season for who knows how long, I continued to read the chapters every single month, and when I think about how many years have really passed and how many stories have passed in that time, it's kind of crazy to imagine that I followed something for that long, but I suppose that's the general experience for everybody who follows a monthly or even weekly series that goes on for a very long time. So, in this particular, maybe you could call this my final recap. This is for the last chapter of Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin, as well as my overall thoughts on how well the series finale was executed. Because I feel while those videos were not always the most wide net in terms of appeal, now that we're at the end, I think it'd be nice to just kind of recap my thoughts and feelings about this final chapter and all the stuff that happened with it, what it all really meant, and how I feel this story, which I and many others have been so committed to for so long, finally came to its conclusion. So, first and foremost, how did I feel about it? Did I enjoy it? You might expect to hear this at the end, but I want to just get this out of the way and say that I felt like it was okay. I felt like the ending was just okay. It wasn't amazing and it wasn't god-awful, but it wasn't spectacular in any capacity in a way that makes me think, man, that payoff was worth it. We could cover the details of the chapter, panel by panel. I think there's enough of that going around. Instead, I'd like to talk about some of the more prudent themes and elements that were within it that are most relevant to readers. So first of all, the revelation that comes from Armin's conversation with Eren that took place technically in the past, but was not remembered until after the events of the finale unfolded, at which point Armin and everybody else gets full recollection of their experiences with Eren in their private paths conversations. This was kind of like a memory capsule that unlocked once they completed the final objective, which was to defeat Eren. And I thought it was a nice way to kind of give a pleasant send-off if you were him, right? You were Eren, and you knew that this was going to be your last chance to talk to your friends. It makes sense that that was the resolution that he chose. But what really doesn't make sense about this is I think a lot of people are very unfairly beating up on Eren for one of his notable scenes, and that is the scene in which he confesses to Armin how he feels about Mikasa. This has been memed on very heavily and been called a destruction of Eren's character, it's character assassination, this and that. And I don't really agree with that. I also don't feel like the series never implied Eren had feelings for Mikasa, because there were multiple instances where their relationship was very clearly defined as they mutually care very strongly about one another. Maybe it wasn't necessarily romantic, but certainly the time Eren told her that he would wrap that scarf around her, no matter how many times she wanted, way back when, they were dealing with the smiling Titan again, Dina's Titan. I feel like that was the most clear moment in which Eren stopped being just somebody she protected, but also somebody interested in protecting her and who reciprocated her feelings for him. Though I think this is kind of where the issue lies when the whole feeling of love and subservience to someone else. Love as a plot device is not exclusive to Attack on Titan, and it's certainly not well executed in Attack on Titan. Frankly, this is a series that did very much without romance for the majority of the franchise, and that was a good thing because I think we can kind of see that Isayama's idea of romance isn't very good. how he uses it narratively is not very good. Um, so the entire relationship between Ymir, the founder, and Mikasa as somebody who was sort of like her modern day parallel of following somebody that you love and serve, no matter how abusive they may be, is a good example of. You could go with like a Stockholm syndrome in Ymir's case, but when you look at what love is supposed to represent, the only way for this story to resolve itself was for someone who loves Eren to be the one to kill him, and that would satisfy the spirit of Ymir. That would be enough to get her to end the Titan curse. I don't really buy that. I mean, it makes sense, but it's garbage. I've seen so many other fan variants of what Ymir's motives were, and I can understand the whole she loved the king bit. I get that, but it does feel rather awful that Eren had to basically be this pawn, as was Mikasa, to satisfy the whims of a 2,000-year-old curse. That said, all the things that Eren always did, the big reveal here also being that everything he's been doing has not been really his choice, but the will of Ymir. He was destined to always do it. Everything was, predestined, fate. Right? Eren's theme throughout the whole series, and arguably the series as a whole, had the theme of freedom. And he was obsessed with the notion of being free, right? Free to not live like cattle, free to do whatever he wanted, to explore the world unrestricted by the power of titans that would hold them prisoner inside of where they live. So with that in mind, I mean, Eren being a slave to Ymir is not a surprise. It's been kind of implied for quite a while that he's been a slave to the will of the Attack Titan, which was that he endlessly serves this free will and this freedom, right? So that was where he was a slave to freedom. And even it was explicitly said earlier in the manga. But being so on the nose a pawn, up until now, it seemed like Eren was the one pulling the strings a lot of the time, especially with his chapter in which he spoke with Grisha through Zeke, with the two of them doing their cross-time communication. That was beautifully executed. And I thought that was some of the best writing when it comes to how to use time travel in a creative way. I felt like that was one of the greatest points of the series for doing something so original, where having a founding and Attack Titan in the same situation allowed their conversation to be facilitated. And I feel like a lot of that quality is kind of gone with the revelations that come from the final chapter, that Eren was putting a hand in everything that took place, including Dina being not interested in eating Berthold, but instead going straight to Eren's house. I don't quite buy it. I think it's more like everything that was set in stone, right? Time is a single line. It all happens at once in Eren's mind. He says this, his mind's all messed up. And this is a very Slaughterhouse 5 kind of experience if you compare it to other media. All time exists as a constant happening simultaneously rather than a series of events. It's just one thing all at once. That's what Eren's experiencing, and he's able to kind of go back and forth into that. And I think the influence of other Titan shifters all happening at the same time is another point to consider, because at this point he has Attack Titan memories, Founder memories, Warhammer Titan memories. So this guy's got all sorts of different shifters that he is ultimately carrying the power of at once, and that includes all of the different influences of their thought processes and just general worldviews. So just like Armin had to deal with, oh no, I inherited the Colossal Titan and now I have Berthold problems, Eren was dealing with a lot more than that. So I think that was one of those things that kind of explains partly why Eren's so messed up. And I think the last key part here, aside from Armin being kind of like, written to be too perfect for anything to ever go wrong, which I think was handled horribly in general. Like, everything just works out for Armin constantly. He says it, oh, well, since it came out of Armin's mouth, it's a good idea. It worked. Great. Look at that. Just like always. Armin's character in general took a complete nosedive of quality after he was burned to a crisp and got the Colossal Titan. So really, we can kind of consider that to be par for the course for the time skip. It's wishful thinking that things worked out the way they do. And unfortunately, when it's a fantasy story, you're allowed to have wishful thinking and make that be the final product. Aaron's confession about his feelings for Mikasa. I don't think it's fair that people have been making fun of him for this. The scenario in which this takes place is a private conversation between Aaron and his closest friend in the world. This is tantamount to being in a therapy session, right? And this is also why a lot of people are very against the idea of going to therapy, because of this vulnerability that it creates. You know, look at Tony Soprano in The Sopranos. You know, at the beginning of the series, he's sitting in a therapist room, and he goes through therapy throughout the series, and these vulnerabilities of his are exposed to his therapist, but not to anyone else. And the idea that he's even in therapy is embarrassing, and it finally becomes a point of, you know, even acknowledging it, right? So going from The Sopranos back to Attack on Titan, why do people look at Aaron confessing this very personal information only in private to his best friend somehow worth making fun of? Yeah, him having a little bit of a meltdown, sure, that might be worth mocking because that's Aaron's character, but I don't think it's a character assassination, because Aaron is always that person. He was, from the beginning of the series, always that whiny crybaby who throws a tantrum when things don't really go his way. And the character development that people think he had, right, the character development of being a stoic, cold-hearted, ruthless guy willing to move forward no matter what, that's true, but also a facade, because how he feels inside is irrelevant. He can't show that to the world, or it would create a problem, right? He can't present his truest self because people would perceive him differently. You know, if you have to play a certain role in order to function in the story, and you can't play that role, well then, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, he had to be that person. He had to be that guy. And it's unfortunate that people are so heartless about this, and they don't look at it in this way, but he's still a 19-year-old guy at the end of the day. You know, he's a young guy who's gone through a lifetime of trauma, has had multiple breakdowns at different points in his life, and finally has just had it. His brain's all messed up, and in this one moment of innocence and weakness, he confesses to Armin, yeah, you know, I do want to be with Mikasa. I don't want her to move on. But him feeling that way and not acting on it shows a lot of strength. So I don't think Aaron's character is nearly as weak and pathetic as everyone seems to think it is, because he had a little bit of a breakdown in a moment of weakness. And if anybody's a piece of crap, it's Armin, who is a horrible friend, who didn't stand there looking out for Aaron at all during this time, and even says to him, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to say something so pathetic. Like, what the hell's your problem, dude? What, you think just because the plot works out for you, you can make fun of everyone else? Why don't you go show Zeke another leaf that turns into a baseball? Armin used to be one of my favorite characters, and I feel like everything about the finale just forced him to be the star and the hero, and it was poorly executed. It sucked in that regard. Armin, you know, I've seen people call the Alliance the Avengers, and wow, that is such an apt descriptor. That is so funny and true. Yes, that is basically the Avengers. You know, they all band together, former enemies, ally, so that they can go and take down Aaron and stop the rumbling. Great. It wasn't great. In fact, it was handled so miserably that you had character deaths that were completely unnecessary. We'll talk about Hanji in a moment, but before that, I want to talk about another unnecessary set of character deaths, because they had to keep killing off all of the people who could have been in a position of authority to make sure that Armin could have called all the shots, with the exception of Levi, because he just follows orders, I guess. Shadis and Maga. The two of them, these two old guys who basically serve the exact same function in Marley and in the Eldian Paradisian Island, right? They were both the guys in charge of commanding new recruits. You know, Magath is raising the warrior candidates and leading armies, and Shadis, former Survey Corps commander and drill instructor. You know, these two characters are parallels to each other in their own respective world. And for some reason, they both needed to blow up in a boat. There was no real reason they both needed to blow up in a boat, but I mean, at least their handshake was cool. At least they had a nice little exchange, and then they got killed taken out of the story because their role was done, which Isayama loved to do throughout, starting with Marco and everyone else whose role is no longer necessary. He just kills them off. Very few of them actually live to tell another, or live to see another day. Then we get to Hanji. All right, Flock represents this great conflict, this opposition to everything that the Alliance is trying to do, and he manages to shoot up the plane and prevent them from escaping, and this means that they now have to stall for time. And for some reason, which I still can't quite understand, the writing dictates that Hanji has to go, this is my time to sacrifice myself so that everybody else can escape. I'm going to go and attack the Titans. I'm going to go attack those giant colossal Titans with thunder spears and do something. What the hell was she going to actually do? And I shouldn't say she. Hanji's pronouns have always been ambiguous, right? It's like one of the running themes of the show. I don't know if it was done by Isayama as a gag or if it's what, but or if it's because Hanji's non-binary. I don't really know the definition of Hanji's identity in this regard, but he, she, or they, Hanji, essentially dies for no good reason other than to say, Armin, you're in charge. Not Levi, you're in charge. No, Armin is in charge. What? Why is Armin in charge? What are you doing? So, why did you kill off Hanji just to have that happen? Like, that was the only reason Hanji needed to be gone. Same with Shadis and Magath, because they were the highest ranking people, and they needed to be out. Well, Levi's injured, so maybe that's why. It's just, I don't know. It's absurd to me. It's honestly absurd to me that all this importance got forced onto Armin being the big star hero. And it's not like it wasn't implied from the beginning of the series, because naturally we had that, right? We had that very early time where Armin's even the narrator, and you can tell that Armin's importance is going to be all the way toward the end. But the way it was executed was just a complete flop, in my opinion. And the Alliance itself is also kind of a joke. Everybody just sort of saying, yeah, you know what? We all agree. We're going to turn against the rumbling because it's the right thing to do. That's a little strange. The people who are from outside of the island, it makes sense. But, whatever. I've seen people criticize the fact that Annie kind of just gets welcomed into the group without any conversation about the things that she did to the rest of them. Reiner gets his just desserts from John. John really gives him a hard time. Nobody really bothers Annie. It's cool. Whatever. Annie's a victim, right? Every one of them is a victim, is the truth. Every one of these kids is a victim. Even like the warriors. I mean, they were 10 years old when they got sent to this island and told to go do that stuff. It's pretty terrible. I won't talk about that any further. Back to the finale. So we get outside of the memory because Aaron's been defeated, and Armin's like, oh my god, I remember everything now. Wow. Aaron, everybody, you're such a man, says Reiner. Yeah, everybody's sitting there. I can't believe how noble Aaron was. Wow, I know he just exterminated 80% of the world, but golly, that was one heck of a guy. And now we're going to be the heroes. In what world does that make sense? You've got no Titan powers anymore. The world, as far as they're concerned, was just destroyed with the exception of a few people, 20% of the population left, who are going to probably be pretty pissed off about what just happened because 80% of the world, friends, family, whomever, outside of the rumbling zone, they're all dead. There's nothing left. Do you think Eldians are now going to be like a welcomed race of people? Do you think this achieved what you were talking about? No, the rumbling needed to be finished in order for this to make sense. An incomplete rumbling means an incomplete resolution. It means that no matter what happens, this race war is still a thing. And the thing that was so unrealistic to me in this moment, right? I mean, who am I going to talk about realism in a story like this? But seriously, human behavior. You have a scene where Annie's father he's talking to the guy from Marley, and they're like, we're not so different after all in the preview. And then suddenly all of the Eldians turn into Titans. Which is like, oh man, even if we are friends, you still can turn into Titans on any moment's notice. And, so that was like the entire point. The reason they were afraid of Eldians and hated them happens. It happened. So there is some justification for this feeling in addition to the rumbling. Not that they wanted to be turned into Titans, but, Wormkin had other plans. We don't. What is with the worm? Introduced last minute. Okay, taken out within a chapter. Fine. You know what? He did his best. For me, a lot of this was just it's unrealistic. It's not human behavior. When they all the Marleyans show up with their guns, and they're pointing their guns at the group of people who've now walked away from all of this, and they're going to shoot him. And it's definitely a throwback to when they were going to shoot Eren with the cannons at the Trust District, when Armin's like, wait, don't do it, salute, right? That big moment from early in season 1. And Pixis is like, I like the cut of his jib. Okay, so this is a throwback to that, where Armin steps up. I'm the one who killed Eren Yeager. You can't shoot us because we're not actually Titans anymore. Otherwise, we would turn into Titans to protect ourselves, wouldn't we? Yes, you're right. You are right about that. Well, I guess we have no reason to kill you then. Does that make any sense? I don't think it does. I mean, does he want to believe that the Titans are really gone? Maybe that's why. He wants to believe that's the truth. But in what scenario? It just doesn't make any sense. Why would these people, after witnessing all this stuff that just happened, and then they're going to let it go, be like, oh, well, if you guys killed him, then I guess it's over. Cool. It's done. If they opened fire right then and there, it would have been excellent storytelling, because it would have taught the lesson that you can't just magically wave a wand and cure racism and cure prejudice and fear. It doesn't go away just because you killed the main villain. And yes, it's true, you got rid of the Titan powers, but the rumbling was a rumor. It was a fairy tale that was used as a deterrent for 100 years. Nobody ever saw the rumbling. All they saw was Marley using Titans to attack different places. Yet the rumbling alone was enough to scare people beyond just the Marleyan thing. Like, racism against Eldians was extremely prevalent all around the world, with the exception of on the island, and slightly less terrible racism in Marley because they had a function to be used as war machines. I mean, it's just, all of this hatred is supposed to just go away. I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a minute. The Marleyans ultimately don't kill Armin and friends for some reason, and that's because it would make for a real bitter ending. So what's the takeaway? Poor Mikasa. She never scored. Poor Eren. He never scored. People like to talk about whether or not Historia's baby is Eren's. Who cares? Whether she's with the farmer or not, I mean, clearly the farmer's there. If it's Eren's baby, we got no way of knowing that unless there's some epilogue to imply otherwise. But I don't know. There's no actual justification. So, you'll have to wait and see what Isayama himself says. But what I can say is that this ending really did not make sense in relation to human fear and impulses. The only thing that I can give some credit to is the fact that they acknowledge that they are traitors to the island, and it wouldn't be a shock if their boat got sunk right then and there as they're making their way, right? That would make perfect sense. I agree with that. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Like, you betrayed Eren. As far as they're concerned, you betrayed Eren. You stopped the rumbling, which Eren did. and would have ensured that there was no more anti-Eldian sentiment left in the world because there was no one left to hate them. Okay, you've prevented that. You are now the ambassadors of peace for the outside world. The same outside world that hated your race, but now doesn't hate your race because, oh, Titans are gone, so it's no Okay, but how do you think they're going to treat people who got left behind? The Eldians that are still in their countries after the rumbling destroyed the entire world. I'm really supposed to believe 3 years went by and everything was peaceful outside? No, that's ridiculous. The peace that they have right now, as they say, right, it's acknowledged in the story. This is, who knows what the future is going to hold. It's a temporary, they're trying to broker peace. But, what's happening? Well, it looks like an Eldian empire is ready to go. They've got their military uniforms. They've replaced the Survey Corps logo with one that has like the rifles. They've had 3 years complete to develop, have children, have a full infrastructure and everything they could need to get a head up or a leg up on the rest of the world, while the rest of the world is probably dealing with a tremendous amount of fallout, right? Because you've got refugees, if there are any survivors from the places that did get rumbled. You're going to have a serious problem just dealing with the logistical nightmare of a post-rumbling world. So that's something to consider, right? All that's happening outside, they're dealing with that. There's a power gap. People are probably going to be vying for power. And then here's the island, all nice and by itself. The Jaegerist faction is now the dominant faction in the island. So what does that imply? It means that we're going to war. That's what's happening. There would be a very slim chance to believe, if not for Historia exclusively saying, no, 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 don't hurt them, that everybody on that boat would be lynched for betraying, right? They'd be hung or shot or whatever for betraying their island, for betraying their people. And that doesn't even consider the shifters who destroyed the wall in the first place, right? Why is Reiner, why is Annie, why is Pieck, why are these three people? They were never on your side. So why are they peace ambassadors? They were always the enemy. The three of them were never actually on the side of the island. None of this makes sense. This is absolutely a nightmare of an outcome for them. But the question is, was the series finale good? It was okay. It was okay. Because it doesn't imply everything's happily ever after, right? It at least acknowledges that there are some flaws here. There are some gaps. Unfortunately, I think too much of it relies on power of friendship wins the day because it's a shonen and not a seinen, right? So, I mean, I expect it's justified that people are angry about this finale. I mean, I'm not angry about it because I'm... Okay, I'll be honest. I'm not angry because my favorite character survived. I've been rooting for John since, the beginning, right? So, John made it to the end. That was all that I really wanted. I didn't care how it ended. I just wanted him to be happy. Hopefully, he'll be happy, right? I don't know. I want to believe that, but in a realistic world, they're going to get off of that boat, and either all of them are going to be tried as traitors, or half of them, because half of them were warriors from Marley who are always against the island in the first place, right? Reiner's going to finally pay, as well as Annie, for all of the people that they killed on the island. But their entire country got wiped out pretty much, so maybe they already paid the price, right? The rumbling was enough. All the rumbling did was delay the inevitable. Just like with World War I coming to a close, it was a peace that was not going to last. People within the military in Europe understood this, that this is a temporary peace. And sure enough, World War II came swinging around and things were bad. This is really no different. That's just human nature to war with each other. It's going to be Eldia versus the world. The question is, who's going to be the winning one at the end? There are no Titan powers, but Eldia has had 3 years of R&D, any leftover refugees from Marley and other places, and hopefully, for their sake, they're going to have what it takes to survive. Being logistically prepared for war They had 3 years to prepare for any kind of counterattack from the outside. They've got your peace ambassadors trying to broker peace. What's the real reason you need peace? So you can prevent somebody from attacking you, right? Which means if they have some kind of non-aggression, then both sides have time to fortify until they're ready to actually attack. Because if that wasn't the case, none of these places would have ever been fighting in the first place. Nonetheless, what is the conclusion of Attack on Titan? It's a bit of a quagmire of just hard to believe, unrealistic outcomes. Armin is just, by true magic, a peacemaker who made everything work out in the end. All of the people who did things wrong. Ymir ends the curse because she saw somebody with unconditional, obsessive love able to break free of that love and kill the person that they loved. And that put a smile on her face. And most of all, Aaron's a bird. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I enjoyed Attack on Titan all the way through. I think that, for the most part, we had a great story that sort of fumbled the ending, which happens a lot. The mysteries that drove the series, as well as brilliantly orchestrated foreshadowing, absolutely make the first parts of Attack on Titan, up until the basement, excellent. And I think it's not unrealistic to suspect some kind of meddling came into play here that prevented Isayama from telling the original story he wanted to tell. I think that it's very realistic to believe that, because editors have so much power. You know, I've heard that the reason we got Cell in Dragon Ball is because Toriyama proposed the androids and 19 and 20, and then his editor was like, "That, are you kidding me? Give me something better than that." So then he made androids 17 and 18, and then he was like, still not good enough, and then he made Cell. So that kind of a back and forth with a good editor produces a result. But it can also be a bad result if your editors get in the way. Do I believe that this was the ending Isayama planned from the beginning? I don't really think so. I think there were a lot of indications that other things were supposed to happen, and they didn't. Things didn't go the way they were expected to go by the author, and just the resolution itself doesn't align with a lot of the setup, foreshadowing dominoes that were supposed to be knocked down by the end. I understand people say, you know, this is their way of coping. They start making up alternate theories or coming up with ways of justifying that this was actually someone else's meddling. I do believe that the original planned ending was lost. I believe that the best ending this series could have had was mutually assured destruction. And even the opening of the final season, My War, was all the explosions and stuff, I felt like the series was going to end with some kind of nuclear weapons or air raids, which were, you know, some of them were they attempted to use them on Aaron's puppet form, but it just seemed to me that with the way they foreshadowed in the beginning of the Marley arc that Titans were becoming obsolete, implies that at some point in the near future, the enemy was going to have the ability to mobilize actual airstrikes and glass whoever they wanted to glass, right? Titans would no longer matter. So I was expecting something to that end, mutually assured destruction, where the Titans go rumble and the last-ditch revenge from outside of the walls drops bombs on the island. That was my personal expectation. It would have ended everything in just complete chaos and calamity. And I think that would have been a valid ending of what happens when you have people who hate each other unconditionally. And the cycle of hatred leading from tragedy to tragedy to tragedy because people keep retaliating against each other. And, you know, you have... I think that's the end of Devilman, right? I mean, the original... You know, at least Crybaby, spoilers, right? And I think the original Devilman, it's not a good ending. It's because, in the end, war is never a good thing. And, you know, Zeke says that, like, war is a terrible thing, Reiner. You know, earlier in the arc, in the Marley arc. I mean, it's just not... This isn't a resolution that has a clear resolution, and they know that. It's addressed in lore, but still, that doesn't make it great. It just makes it okay. It's something, right? It could have been awful. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. I feel like the ball was dropped. I feel like things got changed out, and again, Aaron is a bird, and that's kind of hilarious. The bird memes are so funny. I'm enjoying my time with this as I laugh and laugh and laugh. But I hope at least people can take some kind of positive takeaway from their time with the series. For me, I felt like it was really something special for a lot of it. I felt like the parallels between different characters, once the roles were reversed, were really, really well executed. You know, Aaron and Reiner, and also Gabby being like a new Aaron, and how this whole cycle of violence continues. I thought these were really well explored concepts, but again, people don't just wave a magic wand and get results. I mean, in the end, they're going to war. Flock was right. Everybody was right who said, until the world outside is completely, until all my enemies are destroyed, we'll never be free, right? Everybody on the other end of the ocean. That was true. The rumbling was unfortunately a necessary evil to justify guaranteed safety of everybody within the walls. It's unfortunate. That's just how it was, right? Now, it's an uncertain outcome because they went too far, but not far enough, right? Because when somebody goes too far and then they stop right before finishing the job, you create an entire new generation of hatred. You either have to do all or nothing. And it's unfortunate, but that's the scenario that the characters are now in. Thank you for listening to my final Attack on Titan chapter recap. It was definitely an experience that I won't soon forget. All the months that went by, all the mysteries that were slowly revealed. I'm glad I got to be a part of it. I'm glad I got to be a part of this cultural phenomenon that it was. I think the series was at its best when it was humans versus Titans. I enjoyed the Saving Private Titan stuff after that. But ultimately, it just power creep and maybe meddling editors, or just maybe a misguided finale. Maybe Isayama should have just taken a break instead of rushing to the end of the story because you were tired of working on it. I don't know. I'm not the guy. I just read his work. Life goes on. Thanks for watching. Two last things I forgot to mention. One, I'm glad that they got to see the lava, right, that Aaron and Armin read about. I'm glad they got to see that in the beginning of the chapter. And also, I'm disappointed that we didn't get a see you later Aaron at the end from Mikasa. That was never fulfilled. And further evidence, in my opinion, that the ending was changed. Oh, and if nothing else, the most important thing, Aaron vowed to destroy all of the Titans, and he succeeded. So, if nothing else, there's that. Thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoy this format where I talk at length about various subjects, be sure to check out my podcast called Stanpai Soapbox. It's available on Spotify and other platforms as well, so go ahead and look it up and enjoy the show. I'll see you next time.